In a city that prides itself on shining buildings and polished politics, one man sat quietly on its cold stone steps, with nothing but a book in his lap and a dog by his side. They called him a nuisance, an eyesore, a reminder of promises broken. But they forgot he once stood taller than most, even after the war took his legs. This story isn't about pity. It's about dignity. It's about being seen, even when the world pretends not to look. If you believe stories like this matter real, raw, and human, then stay with us. And if your heart stirs along the way, hit subscribe. It helps us keep telling the ones no one else will. Asterisk, it was barely past 7 on a brisk Tuesday morning when the city began to stretch awake. Skyscrapers caught the early sun, their mirrored windows blinking like tired eyes. The hum of buses mixed with the growl of espresso machines in corner cafes. Businessmen in slim-cut suits tapped their phones impatiently while waiting for overpriced lattes. Somewhere above it all, birds chirped from ledges coated in city dust. At the heart of downtown stood City Hall, an old stone building with white columns and flags flapping lazily overhead. The steps leading up to its entrance had seen it all. Weddings, protests, press conferences, and now, on this particular morning, they saw a man in a wheelchair. He was facing away from the doors, book in hand, legs covered with a faded army blanket, and a German shepherd curled loyally at his side. Morris King wasn't panhandling. He wasn't bothering anyone. He was just there, reading a paperback so worn its spine was held together with electrical tape. His expression was calm, unreadable, a mixture of peace and fatigue. You could tell he had been sitting in that spot for a while. Maybe too long for some people's comfort. A few pedestrians slowed down as they passed, eyes flickering toward him with polite curiosity or unease. Some recognized him. Most didn't. He looked like any older veteran you might see outside. A VA clinic. Graying beard, skin toughened by weather and years, military patches sewn into the shoulder of his worn jacket. But what set Morris apart wasn't his presence. It was the way he held it, like he belonged there, and always had. Reggie, his service dog, lay alert beside him, ears twitching at every sudden noise. His vest read, "Do not pet service animal." But that didn't stop a toddler from wandering close. The child's mother yanked her back quickly, whispering something sharp. "Don't go near him." Morris didn't react. He'd heard worse. The air shifted when the front doors of City Hall opened. Out stepped a security guard, broad-shouldered, buzz-cut, the type who had learned to equate silence with threat. He scanned the steps and spotted Morris. "Sir," the guard called out, already annoyed. "You can't sit here." Morris didn't look up from his book. "I'm not blocking anything." The guard took a few steps down. "This is a government building. You can't loiter on these steps." "I'm not loitering. I'm reading," Morris replied calmly, his voice gravelly but firm. "Is that illegal now?" The guard's jaw tightened. He hated when people talked back, especially someone who looked like they had nowhere else to go. "I'm going to have to ask you to move." Morris sighed and closed his book. His eyes finally met the guard's, deep brown and steady. "I bled for this country. I think I've earned the right to sit on its steps." The two locked eyes, the silence between them thick with tension. Reggie stood now, tail low, body positioned protectively in front of Morris. The guard hesitated. Then, without a word, he stepped forward and gripped the side of Maurice's wheelchair, giving it a rough nudge. Not enough to tip it, but enough to send a message. Morris didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked up, quiet and unyielding, and said, "Push me again, and I'll remind you what restraint looks like." Behind them, a woman, in a beige skirt suit, stopped at the top of the stairs. She held a tablet and a coffee cup and watched the scene unfold. Her eyes darted nervously, and after a moment, she turned and walked back inside. A man in a tie stepped out next. He paused briefly, shook his head, and whispered under his breath, "Jesus?" Before continuing on his way, nobody intervened. No one said anything. That was the city's way. Don't get involved. Keep walking. Keep sipping your coffee. Reggie let out a low growl, not a bark, just a warning. The guard scoffed and took a step back. "Fine, but if I see you here tomorrow, I'll call the cops." "You do that," Morris said softly. "Tell them the crippled vet with the dog is sitting too peacefully for your liking." The guard didn't have a response for that. He walked back inside, shaking his head. Morris exhaled slowly and reopened his book. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned. The page not from fear, but from age and everything it carried with it. Reggie settled down beside him again, tail thumping twice before going still. The city moved on. Buses screeched to a stop. Someone across the street was honking aggressively. A street preacher on the corner shouted something about the end of days. Morris kept reading. He wasn't angry, not in the way people expected. He wasn't even bitter, not anymore. That had faded after the first dozen times he'd been told to move, after the first winter sleeping behind a church, after the first time someone tossed coins into his lap without making eye contact. This place, these steps, they weren't about protest. They were about presence. Being visible in a world that worked hard to look away. And Reggie, his ever-loyal friend, knew it too. The dog stayed alert but calm, as if sensing the weight of the moment without needing to understand the politics behind it. He wasn't just Maurice's companion. He was his lifeline. When the nightmares came, when the phantom pain was too much, when the cold bit through the skin, Reggie stayed. From across the plaza, a group of tourists posed for selfies, completely unaware. A pair of joggers in neon spandex ran past, earbuds, oblivious to the silent tension that had hung in the air minutes earlier. And Morris? He simply existed. He occupied space in a city that would rather he didn't. And that, in itself, was defiance. Later that morning, an intern from the mayor's office would walk by and snap a photo of him, thinking nothing of it. That photo would end up in a group chat titled Clean Up Zone 4. It wouldn't be the last time someone tried to erase him with a swipe of their phone. But for now, Morris remained. Not demanding attention, not making speeches, just reading. On the steps of the building he had fought to defend, on soil that still hadn't decided whether it would defend him back. And the book he held? It wasn't a war memoir. It wasn't a political manifesto. It was a worn copy of Mice and Men. Because sometimes, the ones who've seen the worst of the world still choose to believe in small, quiet stories. Ones where dignity still matters. Where people get to sit down and be left in peace. And as the clouds passed and the sun crept higher, casting long shadows across the stone, Morris turned another page and stayed. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Councilman Derek Whitman, mid-40s, clean-shaven, gelled hair, and teeth too perfect not to be bleached. He wore a crisp navy suit, a pin shaped like a city seal on his lapel, and a smugness that didn't quite hide behind his smile. He tapped his pen against the table as staffers shuffled papers and murmured over bullet points on printed agendas. "All right," Whitman began, his voice smooth like a used car salesman. "Let's get right to it." A few nods around the room. Someone cleared their throat. Whitman pointed to a map projected on the screen. Downtown complaints have spiked again this month. Tourists are avoiding City Hall Plaza. There's a homeless encampment forming on 7th and Broad. And ... He paused for effect. "We had another incident on our front steps this morning." He looked around the room, waiting for the reaction. A woman from the public relations office leaned forward. "Are you referring to the veteran with the dog?" I thought we agreed he'd moved on. He came back, Whitman said, voice clipped. Same guy. Same wheelchair. Same mutt. Reggie is a service animal, said another voice quietly. It belonged to Elena Gonzalez, a junior policy aide who had only been with the council for 3 months. Her eyes flicked downward as soon as Whitman's gaze snapped to her. Excuse me? He asked, leaning in. Elena fidgeted with her pen. I mean, he's not a mutt. That dog's trained. I looked into it last week. Whitman gave a dismissive wave. Whether he's trained or not, he's not licensed with our office. And the man Morris King, is it? Has now been the subject of 3 formal complaints. Sleeping in public, loitering, obstructing access to a public building. He wasn't sleeping, Elena said, a little more firmly. He was reading. Whitman shot her a cold smile. What he was doing isn't the point. His presence is. The room went quiet. It was the kind of silence that happens when people want to disagree, but fear it's not worth the fallout. Whitman stood and paced to the window. From up there, the front steps of City Hall were barely visible, but the memory of seeing Morris sitting there that morning, his calm, unmoved face clung to him like a bad smell. He's not just some random guy, Whitman continued. He coached high school football here years ago. Bronze Star, combat injury, all of it, which makes this even worse. A communications aide blinked. Worse? I thought we liked vets. We do. When they're clean, photogenic, and wearing medals during parades, Whitman snapped. Not when they're sleeping on marble and bringing media attention to our failure to house them. There it was, the truth. Raw and callous. He's a PR problem, Whitman said flatly. And let me remind everyone, this building our image is what drives investment, fundraising, tourism. We sell pride, not pity. He picked up a copy of a flyer from a nearby stack. On it, a photo of downtown with the tagline, "A city that shines." Elena, he continued without turning, do you think that flyer sells better with or without a homeless veteran on the front steps? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Whitman turned back to the room. So here's what we're proposing. New ordinance. No overnight occupancy or sitting on the City Hall premises between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. That covers camping, loitering, and any prolonged presence without permit. A man in a blue tie raised a hand. Won't that look like we're targeting the homeless? Whitman gave a humorless chuckle. We don't target anyone. We regulate behavior. Someone else piped up. Should we loop in law enforcement? Start with a soft push? No, Whitman said. We do this quietly. We draft it, vote on it by Friday, pass it Monday. No press release, just a sweep. A sweep? Elena asked. You mean like literally remove people? Whitman looked at her like she had asked whether water was wet. Yes, Elena, we remove them. We clean the steps, we protect the city's image, and we move forward. Someone clapped softly. Then another. Polite, nervous applause rippled through the room. And then, just as the discussion was about to move on to floral installations for summer tourism, the door at the back of the room creaked open. All eyes turned. Morris King rolled in slowly, Reggie trotting beside him. No one spoke. The marble wheels of his chair echoed louder than any voice. He wasn't supposed to be there. No one had noticed him come in. No one had checked the list of speakers. But there he was present, real, undeniable. Whitman froze, trying to mask surprise with irritation. Morris didn't flinch. He rolled right past the coffee cart, past the portraits, and stopped near the open mic, reserved for public commentary. He adjusted the brake on his chair. Then, with the calm of a man who had seen far worse than awkward silences, he leaned in. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was measured, deep, grounded in something more powerful than politics. You want to erase people like me, he began, because we remind you of wars you start, but don't finish. Streets you pave, but never walk. Wounds you bandage for. Photo ops, then leave to rot. The room was stone silent. Even Whitman didn't speak. Morris looked around. He made eye contact with everyone one by one, making sure no one could say later that they didn't hear. I'm not here for pity, he continued, and I didn't roll in here to start a fight. But I will not vanish because you're uncomfortable with the truth. Reggie stood still beside him, ears perked. You think this is about an ordinance, about appearances, but it's not. It's about who gets to belong in this city and who gets pushed to the edge of it. I bled for this place, and I deserve more than to be shuffled off like garbage. A long pause. Then Morris simply added, I'll be outside when you decide whether this building stands for all of us or just the ones who can afford to look clean. He wheeled back slowly, turned, left the same way he came in. No one clapped. No one spoke. Even Whitman didn't reach for the next agenda item. They sat in silence, surrounded by their own reflections in the marble floors and framed slogans on the walls. Outside, the sunlight was brighter than before. And on the steps once more, Maurice sat, book open. Reggie curled beside him. But now, everyone inside knew exactly who was out there and why. Morris didn't expect to speak that day. He had shown up to City Hall mostly out of exhaustion. Not just physical, though, that lingered in his shoulders and along the stump of his left thigh, but emotional exhaustion. The kind that builds over years of watching people cross the street to avoid looking at you. The kind that creeps in every time a social worker forgets your name, or a neighbor locks their door a little faster when you pass by. He had learned to live with being invisible. But today, something cracked open. Maybe it was the guard shoving his wheelchair like it was a shopping cart. Maybe it was the way the air in that meeting room had smelled too clean, too detached from the reality he'd just rolled through. Or maybe it was the way they all talked about him like he was a landscaping problem, not a man. So in the public. Microphone was rolled into place for citizen comments. Morris wheeled himself forward. Nobody invited him to speak. Nobody had to. The law said public comment was public, and he was damn sure still a citizen. The chamber held about 100 people, half city officials, half spectators, and a few stragglers from other departments just there to kill time before lunch. They shifted in their seats when they saw him approach, unsure what to expect. Some recognized him from that morning's incident on the steps. Others just saw a black man in a wheelchair and made assumptions. But when Morris adjusted the mic and cleared his throat, the whole room went still. His voice was quiet at first, like someone telling a story at the end of a long day. Measured, controlled. I wasn't going to say anything, he began, eyes down for a second before meeting the crowd, but then I heard my name being passed around like I was a nuisance. Or a stain on the sidewalk. He paused. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Whitman looked annoyed, but said nothing. I guess some of you forgot I can hear, and speak, and vote. Morris glanced toward the council members, and then to the staffers along the walls, many of whom now looked very interested in their notes. You want to erase people like me, he said, his voice tightening just slightly. Because we remind you of wars you start, but don't finish. Streets you pave, but never walk. Wounds you bandage for photo ops, then leave to rot. That line hit like a slow, sharp slap. You ever seen someone bleed out on the floor of a Huey helicopter? He asked, voice lower now, eyes locked on a man in the third row who looked away. I have. You ever write a condolence letter too? A mother whose son died in your arms? I have. He looked at his hands. One of them trembled slightly. He gripped the armrest to steady it. I didn't roll in here for pity. I didn't bring this dog for attention. I bring him because some nights I scream so loud the neighbors think I'm dying. He wakes me up before I hurt myself." Reggie stood quietly by his side, his ears flicking at each rise in Morris's voice. "Do you think that's the life I wanted when I signed up at 19? Do you think I wanted to come back and be ignored, discarded, and talked about in closed-door meetings like I'm a broken bench?" Someone in the back murmured, "Jesus?" Morris heard it, but he didn't stop. This city used to be proud of its veterans. Hell, you used to invite us to parades, hand us little medals, name a park after someone every few years. But the truth is, the minute we stop looking like the heroes you need us to be, you forget we ever served. He leaned forward. "I'm not the only one out there. There's a guy 2 blocks over Charlie, used to be a combat medic. Sleeps under a tarp now, because the waiting list for housing is 3 years long. There's Sheila down by the bus station, Marine. Single mother, PTSD, so bad she flinches when someone drops a spoon." He pointed to the room, but not to any one person. "Don't you dare tell me this is about policy. This is about shame. You're ashamed of us because we remind you that you broke us and you didn't fix us." Dead silence. No coughing. No chair shuffling. Even the city clerk's fingers hovered above her keyboard, unsure whether to keep typing. Morris's voice softened, but his gaze hardened. "I didn't come here to fight. But I won't vanish because you're uncomfortable with the truth." He took a deep breath, his chest rising slow. "Just because we're outside doesn't mean we're outsiders. We bled for this place. And I'll be damned if I let you pretend we're nothing more than an eyesore." A long silence followed. No applause, no outrage, just the heavy sound of people realizing they'd been seen through. Morris leaned back and unhooked the mic, rolling quietly away from the stand. Reggie followed, his leash gently coiled in one hand. As he turned to exit the chamber, someone no one knew exactly who whispered, "Thank you for your service." Morris didn't turn around. He'd heard that line too many times to count. It wasn't that it meant nothing. It just meant less than it should have. Like a bandage on a wound left to fester. Back in the hallway, Elena Gonzalez rushed to catch up with him. She didn't say anything at first. Just walked beside him, matching his slow pace. "That was something," she finally said. Morris didn't respond. She glanced at Reggie, who looked up at her briefly. "I'm sorry," she said. "About what they said? About what I didn't say?" Morris stopped his chair. "Then speak next time," he said gently. "They don't change unless someone inside the room speaks up." Elena looked down, nodded. "I will." As Morris rolled toward the elevator, she called after him. "Hey, Mr. King?" He turned slightly. "That speech, did you plan it?" He smiled a little. "Nope, I just got tired of being quiet." The elevator dinged, and the doors opened. As they closed behind him, Elena stood there, her arms crossed tight, holding on to something she didn't fully understand yet, but knew she couldn't ignore anymore. Back inside the chamber, the meeting never quite resumed. Councilman Whitman tried to steer the conversation back to the next item on the agenda, something about flower beds along the waterfront, but no one really listened. The spell had been broken. The mask slipped outside, on the front steps. Morris settled into his spot once again. Reggie curled up beside him, his eyes watching everything and nothing. The city continued to move, as it always did. But now, at least for a moment, it was listening. It started as a clip, just a 38-second video, grainy and shaky, filmed from the back row of the council chamber by someone who hadn't planned to record anything that day. They just happened to press record halfway through Morris's speechwrite, around the part where he said, "You want to erase people like me because we remind you of wars you start but don't finish." That clip hit the internet before lunch. By 2 p.m., it was on Twitter. By 4, it had been posted to Reddit, Facebook, and half a dozen veterans forums. People were tagging friends, uncles, fathers, and former platoon buddies. You need to see this guy. This man just shut down a city council meeting without raising his voice. They tried to treat him like trash. Now he's holding up a mirror. By 6 p.m., the name Morris King was trending in 5 cities. And that's when Lena Cho found it. Lena was 26, overworked, and badly underpaid as a junior writer for a local digital news startup that specialized in what her boss called clickable social grit. She had spent the morning chasing a story about a new bike lane getting canceled due to budget conflicts, but that story had fizzled by lunch. She'd gone to heat up leftover pho when she saw the clip pop up on her phone. She tapped play, expecting something forgettable. Instead, she sat down and watched the entire 38 seconds without blinking. Then she watched it again and again. She knew that voice, that tone. It wasn't a politician's voice. It wasn't rehearsed. It was what people sounded like when they stopped trying to be heard and just decided to speak plain and raw. And Lena, who had grown up watching her grandfather, also a veteran, slowly fade from public memory, felt her chest tighten. By 8 p.m., she had Morris's name, background, and 2 contacts from the local VA. She filed her first story in under 90 minutes. The headline was simple: the man they tried to push away. Vietnam vet confronts city council with quiet fury. She embedded the clip, added a brief summary, and ended with a quote: "I didn't come here to fight, but I won't vanish because you're uncomfortable with the truth." It got 13,000 shares in 3 hours. Comments exploded. "My dad was there in Nam. He still wakes up screaming, 'Thank you, Mr. King.' I work in city planning. The way they talk about the homeless. Behind closed doors? This guy is telling the truth. The dog's name is Reggie. I met them once outside the courthouse. He gave me his sandwich because I was hungry. This man is a hero. Please, someone help him. Give him a platform. Give him a home." By midnight, Lena was still awake, digging deeper. She found an old yearbook photo. Morris King, assistant coach, Lincoln High School. Smiling younger, standing next to a football team of mostly black and brown teenagers. She found an old article from 2005 praising him for rescuing a kid who had collapsed from heat stroke on the field. She found a Department of Defense press release naming him as a Bronze Star, recipient for bravery in the Guangzhou province. And then she found something else, buried in a set of dull budget PDFs on the City of Crestline's website. Fiscal year 2023 was a curious entry. Reallocation of surplus funds from Veteran Housing Initiative gives civic landscaping and beautification project. #C27. She dug deeper. That beautification project? It involved planting hydrangeas and installing lead-lit planters around City Hall's perimeter, exactly where Morris had been told not to sit. Veteran housing money had been used to buy flowers. The symbolism was too bitter to be poetic. She blinked at the screen, then clicked New Document. Morris, meanwhile, had no idea what was happening online. He was sitting on a bench outside a 24-hour diner on Jefferson and 9th. Reggie curled up at his feet, his blanket folded neatly beside him. The evening air was cool, and the diner's neon sign buzzed softly above him. Mabel's all-night eats. He wasn't hungry. Not yet. A cook named Marcus sometimes slid him a plate around 10:30 if there were leftovers. It was their quiet agreement. Reggie stirred. A young woman approached, holding a phone in her hand. "Sir, are you Morris King?" He looked up slowly, cautious. "Who's asking?" "I'm sorry, I'm Lena Cho. I'm a journalist." "I saw Your speech today. It's everywhere. Morris blinked. What do you mean everywhere? She pulled out her phone and showed him the video. Thousands of likes. Tens of thousands of views. Shares. Comments. He frowned. That was supposed to be a 10-minute meeting. Not a broadcast. Lena laughed softly. You struck a nerve. People needed to hear it, and I think they're ready to listen. Morris looked at the screen again. A long pause. Then he said, they usually listen just long enough to feel better about doing anything. But Lena didn't back off. This time might be different. I'm working on something. About the council. The way they've used veterans like a PR tool while cutting actual support. I found records. It's bad, Morris. It's real bad. He sighed. I'm not looking to be a hero. I just want a bench that doesn't come with an eviction notice. I think, Lena said carefully, you might have just started something bigger than that. Reggie barked once, almost like agreement got the next morning. It was front-page news, not just the video, not just the speech, but Lena's full report. Councilman redirected housing funds to flower beds outside City Hall. Local news picked it up. National news followed. Veterans groups began issuing statements. Civic watchdogs demanded an ethics review. Suddenly, City Hall was scrambling. Morris's face, tired, weathered, calm, was now everywhere. On TV, on iPads in subway stations, projected behind smug anchors, asking how something like this could happen. But Morris wasn't watching. He was sitting in a quiet park near the river, where the city was less polished and the benches were bolted to the concrete. He had his book. Reggie had a half-chewed tennis ball. A man walked by and said, "You're that vet, right?" Morris nodded slowly. The man reached into a paper bag and handed him a sandwich. "For you and your dog?" Morris accepted it with a quiet thank you. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel invisible. But he didn't feel like a celebrity either. He felt seen. As a person. Not a case file. Not a symbol. Not a threat. Just Morris. 2 days. That's all it took for Morris King to go from invisible to viral, and then from viral to a threat. It started quietly. A few murmurs among the council members. A backroom meeting with a city attorney. A late-night call from a nervous communications officer who told Councilman Whitman, the story's out of control. We have to act. Whitman didn't blink. He'd been through scandals before: alleged misuse of funds, a campaign finance mix-up, a speeding ticket he insisted wasn't his. He had a playbook, always did. And the first chapter was simple: control. The narrative. So while Morris sat in a quiet park, feeding bits of toast to Reggie, the city's spin machine roared to life. They dug into Morris's past. Not the part where he served 2 tours in Vietnam. Not the medals. Not the years he spent coaching high school kids or mentoring young veterans struggling to re-enter civilian life. No. They looked for the cracks. And eventually, they found one. 12 years earlier, Maurice had been detained during a protest outside a police precinct. It was a veterans demonstration against the closure of a mental health wing at the local VA. Morris had yelled. He'd refused to move. He'd thrown his empty water bottle in frustration. Police said he acted aggressively. The charges were dropped, but the footage remained. It was grainy, unclear, but that didn't matter. A 15-second clip surfaced, Morris raising his voice, arms flailing. No context, no sound. Just a blurry shot of a black man in a wheelchair. Being restrained, the headlines came quickly. Viral veteran has violent past? Was city council target of staged protest? Service dog or street menace? Local vet under scrutiny. Whitman's media consultant went on air. Look, nobody's saying he didn't serve, she said, sitting under soft lighting in a news studio. But we have to ask, was his outburst a genuine concern or part of a pattern of instability? The host nodded gravely. It's unfortunate when trauma leads to dangerous behavior. And just like that, Morris King hero, veteran, mentor became Morris King, potential threat. Morris first saw the clip on the small TV at Mabel's diner. It played on a loop above the register, sound off, but the captions told him enough. Unstable. It read, anger issues, refused help. He stared at the screen, fork frozen halfway to his mouth. Reggie shifted under the booth, sensing the tension in his human's body. A waitress white, mid-30s, tired eyes stood nearby, watching him. "Can you believe this crap?" she finally said, sliding him another cup of coffee. "You coached my brother at Lincoln High. You drove him home when our mom got laid off and couldn't afford gas." Morris nodded, but didn't speak. "I remember," she added, voice shaking. "You sat outside his graduation in the pouring rain just to cheer him on." Still, Morris said nothing, because he knew how fast public memory faded when fear took over. By that evening, the attacks grew louder. A local AM radio host called him an opportunist playing the vet card. A Facebook page popped up titled, "Keep Crestline Clean," posting photos of Morris with captions like, "Not a hero, just homeless." Then came the dog. Someone leaked that Reggie, despite being a registered service animal, wasn't licensed under the city's updated animal ordinance. It didn't matter that the ordinance was less than a year old. It didn't matter that Morris had documentation from the VA. What mattered was the headline. Unlicensed dog accompanies disruptive veteran Morris sat outside the shelter that night, Reggie's head on his lap, and whispered, "They're coming after you now, too?" Reggie whined, confused. He didn't understand smear campaigns. He only knew that his human hadn't smiled in over a day. Lena Cho was furious. She stood in the cramped newsroom, waving a printed headline in the air. "They're spinning this like it's a scandal. This man served this country. He lives with the weight of that every day. And now they're painting him like a threat because they don't like how he made them look." Her editor looked tired. "Lena, I get it, but this is politics. It's war. It's cowardice," she snapped. Plain and simple. She left the newsroom and walked 10 blocks to find Morris. She found him sitting on a bench outside a closed library, reading. Again. Or trying to. He looked up when she approached. "I saw the news," she said quietly. He closed the book. "They've got footage of me yelling 12 years ago. And now they're saying my dog's illegal." Lena shook her head. "It's not about the footage. It's about fear. You spoke truth in a room full of power. They didn't like that." Morris leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I didn't ask for this. I just wanted to sit and read without being pushed off a damn sidewalk." Lena sat beside him. "That's exactly why they're scared of you," she said. Back at City Hall, Whitman held a private press briefing. He stood at a podium, flanked by American flags and a pair of very clean-looking security guards. "We respect our veterans," he began, "and we recognize their sacrifices. But we must also ensure the safety and order of our public institutions." Reporters fired questions. "Councilman, did your office reallocate veteran housing funds for decorative planters?" Whitman smiled tightly. "Those were urban revitalization projects. They served the whole community." "Is it true you referred to veterans as visible liabilities?" No comment. "Will Morris King be allowed to return to the city hall steps?" Whitman's smile faded. "We're reviewing policy. But no one is above the law." Morris watched that clip. He was in a different diner this time. A cheaper one. No booths, just cracked stools and a sticky counter. "Reggie," he muttered, "you ever notice how they smile when they're about to stab you in the back?" The waitress behind the counter leaned over. "He thinks he's going to bury you," she said, refilling his coffee. Morris raised an eyebrow. "But he doesn't know something," she continued. "You already lived through worse. You already survived the war, the streets, the silence. He doesn't get it. Your life's been a fight from day one. And you're still here." Morris stared at her, surprised. She shrugged. "You coached my cousin, Lincoln High. He said you taught him what grit meant." Morris didn't respond, but he smiled. The first real one in days. The next morning, Morris walked well, rolled back to City Hall, not because he wanted to cause a scene, but because he refused to let lies keep him away from a place he had every right to be. Reggie walked beside him. They didn't bring signs, or chants, or a camera crew. They brought a presence, and when he parked on those same cold steps and opened that same old paperback book, people stopped, watched, some clapped. Others just nodded. A veteran from the Korean War left a note beside him. "They tried this with us too. Hold the line." A teenage girl handed him a bottle of water and said, "My mom says thank you." Morris looked at her and said, "Tell your mom I'm not going anywhere." By Monday morning, the steps of City Hall no longer belonged to the council. They belonged to the people. Began with veterans. Just a few at first, men in faded jackets and baseball caps, embroidered with patches from wars the country forgot. Some walked with canes, others leaned on old friends or therapy dogs. They stood beside Morris, not saying much, just standing. It was the kind of presence that didn't need speeches. Then came the teachers. 2 of them from Lincoln High held up cardboard signs that read, "He coached us before they cut our funding. Justice rolls with wheels." After that came the students. High school kids in backpacks, college students in hoodies. Some marched with handmade signs. Others simply came to listen. Then the nurses came, the bus drivers, the postal workers, a retired firefighter, an ex-mayor's daughter, a grocery store clerk who had seen Morris give away his coat one winter to a woman sleeping on a bench across the street. By noon, the plaza outside City Hall swelled with over 400 people. And Morris? He was right where he always was, near the top of the steps, back straight in his chair, Reggie sitting at his side like a sentinel. He didn't shout. He didn't wave a flag. He didn't need to. Lena Cho live-streamed from her phone. Her followers grew by the minute. "We're here," she said into the camera, her voice calm but electric. What began as a man reading on a bench is now a reckoning. This city tried to shame a veteran into silence. Today, that veteran brought the city to listen. She turned the camera toward the crowd. There were signs now, thousands of them, some sharp, some scrawled in marker, some poetic, some furious. Wheels of justice roll on. Benches for all, not just the beautiful. Reggie has more honor than our leaders. Near the fountain, a little girl on her dad's shoulders held a sign. "My grandpa is Morris too." Inside City Hall, the council chambers were locked, curtains drawn, doors guarded. Councilman Whitman sat in his private office, surrounded by aides and legal consultants. His once proud American flag lapel pin sat crooked on his jacket. The man who had smirked during Morris's first speech now chewed his thumbnail like it owed him money. "We can't let them in," he muttered. "It'll make us look weak." One of his aides frowned. "Sir, with all due respect, not letting them in makes us look like cowards." Whitman stood, jaw tight. "This is an organized ambush. That veteran is the figurehead. We're not negotiating with a crowd." His assistant cleared her throat. "Sponsors are pulling out." "What?" She slid a list across the desk. "Half of their donors, real estate developers, consulting firms, private contractors had rescinded public support. And," she added, 3 other council members just called. They're considering resigning if this isn't resolved. They don't want their names tied to this. Whitman turned red. Outside, the chants began. We see you. We hear you. We won't disappear. Back on the steps, Morris sat quietly. Lena kneeled next to him, holding out her phone. They want you to speak again, she said softly. Morris didn't answer right away. He looked over the crowd. At the nurse, handing out bottled water. At the old veteran adjusting a Marine course. Flag on his shoulder. At the kid with headphones, painting "Truth is louder" on a sheet of cardboard. I'm not trying to lead anything, he said. Lena smiled. You don't have to. You already did. She handed him a mic. He took it. The crowd quieted as the static cracked. Morris adjusted the mic, clearing his throat once. I didn't plan this, he began, his voice carrying over the speakers. And I didn't come here to build a protest. I came here because they told me I didn't belong. Because I sat on steps I helped pay for with my time, my taxes, and the bones I left in another country. He paused. Then they told me my dog was a threat. That I yelled once, so I must. Be dangerous. That my chair made people uncomfortable. That my story was inconvenient. A few murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. But you know what's actually dangerous? Morris continued. Forgetting that people matter. That's what rots a city. Not a vet on the stairs. Not a kid in a hoodie. Not a woman without a home. But a system that pretends its image is more important than its soul. Applause. He raised a hand to settle them. I didn't come to take over anything. I'm just tired. I want a place to rest without being moved along. I want benches where truth sits comfortably. And I want you to remember that none of us are invisible unless we allow ourselves to be. He lowered the mic, and the crowd exploded. Not just cheers. Not just applause, but a release. A full-body exhale from hundreds of people who'd been waiting. Too long for someone to say it out loud. An hour later, the council chamber remained shut, but pressure was mounting. Local news vans circled the block. A national news anchor requested a sit-down with Morris. A petition reached 65,000 signatures in a single day. Civil rights lawyers began showing up on site. A GoFundMe started from Maurice's housing and legal defense, already past $40,000. Inside City Hall, Whitman finally cracked. He stepped into the chamber, turned to the press pool, and muttered, I'll give a statement. He walked to the podium, forced a smile, and began reading from a prepared sheet. We understand the community's passion, he said stiffly. We are reviewing policies to better serve all citizens while maintaining civic safety and integrity. Someone from the back shouted, Say his name. Whitman flinched. He looked into the camera lens. We acknowledge. Morris King. We regret if his experience was, say his name. Another voice bellowed. Whitman took a breath, shook his head. This briefing is over. He turned and left out the microphones, picked up the whispers as he walked away. Coward. Too late. We see you now. Outside, Morris didn't celebrate. He sat in the shade. Quiet. Reggie curled under the chair. Head resting on Morris's foot. Lena joined him, placing a bottle of water next to his leg. You just cracked the wall, she said. Morris looked out at the crowd. Some still chanting. Others sitting in circles, sharing sandwiches. A few kids started painting a mural on a blank brick wall across the street. One section showed a man in a wheelchair and a dog. No name. Just the image. Morris spoke softly. I didn't want to lead a movement. You didn't, Lena replied. You reminded one. He let the words settle, then looked toward the steps and smiled, just a little. By Friday, everything had changed, and nothing had changed. The protest was still going, but now it had structure. There were water stations, volunteer medics, folding chairs under tents. A local union had donated a generator and lights so people could stay through the night. Maurice's spot on the steps had turned into a kind of sacred space. Nobody sat there unless he invited them. But inside City Hall? Chaos. Councilman Derek Whitman's office was a war zone. His voicemail was full. His inbox had crashed. His aides had stopped wearing name tags outside the building because people were starting to recognize them in the street, and not kindly. The mayor, who had stayed silent until now, finally held a press conference without Whitman. "I want to be clear," she said, standing in front of a wall of city seals. "The people of Crestline have spoken. Veterans are not liabilities. Homelessness is not a crime. And dignity is not negotiable." She called for a full ethics investigation into the redirection of funds from veteran housing. By the next morning, Whitman had resigned. There was no press release, no farewell statement. He was just gone. A locked door, an empty desk, a scandal-shaped void. Morris didn't go to the press conference. He didn't watch it live, didn't read the mayor's speech, didn't join in the celebration that followed the announcement. Instead, he was exactly where he had been that first morning, on the steps, with Reggie's head resting quietly on his lap. Across from him, the crowd was buzzing. "He's out!" someone shouted. Whitman resigned. There were hugs, cheers, tears. A small boy ran past holding a handmade sign that read, "We won!" Morris didn't move. He just stared out toward the skyline, calm, grounded, still. Wrapped in something deeper than victory. Lena sat beside him a few minutes later. "You really don't want to go see it?" she asked. Morris shook his head. "What for? He's gone. You made it happen." "No," Morris said. He collapsed. "But I didn't cause that. His arrogance did." Lena blinked. "That's fair." He looked at her, eyes kind but tired. "You know what I did do, though?" "What?" "I stayed." That night, Morris finally returned to the VA hospital. Not for himself. A young veteran named Chris had lost both legs in Afghanistan and was struggling to get used to his prosthetics. Morris had met him once in the waiting room. Now he wheeled himself down the corridor of the rehab wing and knocked on Chris's door. Chris looked up from his bed, surprised. "Mr. King?" Morris smiled. "Heard you were learning to walk again. Figured you shouldn't do it alone." Chris blinked. "Aren't you busy being famous?" Morris laughed. "Fame is a crowded noise. This is real." They spent the next 2 hours working on posture, breathing, the frustrating patience of trying to balance again on legs that no longer felt like your own. Morris didn't say much. He let his presence do most of the talking. And when Chris managed to take 6 steps without help, he whispered, "I didn't think I could." Morris just nodded. "You did." Reporters caught up with Morris the next morning as he wheeled out of the hospital. "Why weren't you at City Hall for the resignation?" one asked. "Do you think this movement is over?" Another added. Morris paused, adjusting Reggie's leash. Ben said plainly, "This was never about him. It's about what kind of city we choose to be." Another reporter asked, "And what now?" Morris looked toward the park across the street. "Now we rest," he said. "Then we build benches that don't judge who's sitting on them." The city began to shift. It started slowly. A new ordinance was proposed to fund veteran housing using emergency infrastructure money. It passed unanimously. A nonprofit launched a public-private partnership to install 17 benches around City Hall with plaques that read, "In honor of those who served, and those still serving, visible or not." One of the benches had a small bronze statue next to it, a service dog with its head tilted upward, eyes alert. Reggie became a local icon. Kids drew him in chalk on the sidewalks. A mural of him appeared on the side of a community center. Someone made stickers of him wearing sunglasses that said, "Stay, speak truth." Morris, for his part, stayed out of the spotlight. He still rolled by the protest camp, still waved at the students and teachers. But mostly, he just lived. People brought him coffee now, sandwiches, books. A librarian started a mobile cart that parked near the steps twice a week. Morris was her best customer, but the moment that really shook the city came one rainy evening. A black SUV pulled up in front of City Hall. A man in a suit stepped out, umbrella in one hand, shame in the other. Whitman. He wasn't recognized, right? Away, the beard was new. So was the tired slump at his shoulders. Morris noticed first. He didn't move. Whitman approached slowly, nervously. I wasn't sure if you'd still be here, he said. Morris looked up. You always assumed I'd disappear. Why change that now? Whitman sighed. I came to apologize. Why? Because I was wrong. About you. About all of it. Morris didn't blink. What made you change your mind? The cameras? The donors pulling out? Or the fact that you couldn't walk past my face without seeing it on a protest sign? Whitman swallowed hard. I don't expect forgiveness. Good, Morris said, because you don't get it just for showing up. There was a pause. But, Morris added, you can sit. That bench is for everyone? Whitman stared at him, then sat. For the first time, they were eye-level. No power. No podium. Just two men, side by side. In the rain. No one took a photo. No one made a speech. But something passed between them. Call it clarity, or humility, or the long, slow grace of a man finally facing himself. And then Reggie barked. That night, Lena wrote her final article in the series. She titled it, The Bench That Didn't Move. She ended it with this. We often ask what it means to stand for something. But sometimes, it means sitting and refusing to move until the world remembers who you are. Morris King didn't start a revolution. He reminded us that dignity doesn't ask permission. It just stays. It had rained the night before, not the kind of aggressive storm that knocked out power or scared kids awake, but a soft, steady rainfall. The kind that soaked into the streets and rinsed the dust off tired sidewalks. It was the kind of rain that made things feel new again. By morning, the sky was washed clean. The sun filtered through light clouds, and the air smelled of wet stone, distant flowers, and promise. Morris rolled down Jefferson Street like he had for years, Reggie walking beside him in a yellow raincoat that someone's daughter had handmade and delivered the week before. The dog didn't mind the poncho. He wore it like armor. The city was different now, but only if you knew where to look. Benches had returned, not just outside City Hall, but in parks, under bus stops, along sidewalks that had once been too polished for people like Morris. But these weren't just benches. Each one bore a small bronze plaque. Some were simple, for those who served. Others had names, stories, quotes. One read, because sitting down is sometimes the bravest thing you can do. And then there was the one in front of City Hall, the last bench, newly installed. Deep wood grain, reinforced steel base, wide enough for two. Placed just slightly off-center, so it didn't interfere with foot traffic, but still couldn't be missed. The plaque on this one read, in honor of those who served, and those still serving, visible or not. Morris rolled toward it slowly. It had taken weeks to finish construction. City approval, local artist collaboration, a custom engraving shop. They had asked him what quote to use. He told them, don't quote me, quote everyone. And they did. A small crowd had gathered. Not a protest, not a rally. Just people, neighbors, students, old friends. A few strangers who had watched from afar and felt like they knew him anyway. They stood respectfully. Quietly. Morris reached the bench, parked his wheelchair, and stared at it for a long time. Reggie hopped up beside him, placing one paw on the bench as if inspecting the woodwork. A little girl approached, clutching her mother's hand. She looked up at him, eyes wide. "Mom," she whispered, "is he a hero?" Her mother didn't speak at first. Her throat caught. Then she knelt beside her daughter and said softly, "Yes, baby, but not because he fought in a war. Because he never stopped fighting after it." Morris turned his head slightly. He smiled, the kind of smile that comes not from joy, but from peace. Someone handed him a folded paper. Inside was a copy of the city's latest ordinance, equal access to public residences, veteran inclusion clause. Morris read it once, folded it, tucked it into his jacket. He didn't need the law to tell him he belonged anymore. But it was nice to know the city finally agreed. Later that day, Lena arrived. No press badge, no camera. Just jeans, a worn hoodie, and a coffee in each hand. "You look good next to that bench," she said, handing him one. Morris sipped. "Hard to compete with a well-finished piece of oak." Lena smiled. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't spoken? That day?" He thought for a moment. "Nothing would have changed," he said quietly. "Not at first, but the silence would have gotten heavier. And eventually, I wouldn't have been able to carry it anymore." She sat beside him. "Sometimes I still think." "I didn't say much." "You didn't have to," Lena replied. "You just told the truth, and stayed long enough for people to hear it." A few hours passed. The sun shifted. People came and went. Some sat beside him for a moment. Some left flowers, letters, medals. A man in a business suit walked by and gave a respectful nod. A kid on a skateboard asked if he could pet Reggie. Morris said yes. And when an elderly woman approached in a walker, Morris helped her sit beside him. They didn't speak. They just watched the city. It had a rhythm to it, now more human, less polished. You could hear it in the street musicians who came every Sunday to play jazz under the statue of Reggie. You could feel it in the way teenagers didn't cross the street to avoid the man in the wheelchair anymore. You could see it in how people held the door a little longer, asked names instead of assuming stories, and stayed long enough to hear someone finish a sentence. Change hadn't exploded. It had settled. And that made it real. As evening came, the lights turned on small LEDs under the bench, casting a warm glow. A plaque shimmered in the dusk. Lena stood up, ready to leave. "I'm thinking about writing a book," she said. Morris looked up. "About what?" She shrugged. "This. You, us. The bench. All of it." He nodded. "Title?" She grinned. "The Last Bench." He chuckled. "Sounds like something they'd assign in high school English." "Good," she said. "Maybe they'll learn something sooner than we did." The crowd thinned. The street quieted. But Morris stayed. Reggie curled up at his feet, tail flicking. In half-dreams, a light breeze rustled the trees. A bus passed by, not in a rush. A couple walked hand in hand across the plaza. Someone turned on a nearby street lamp with a soft click, and Morris sat there, not alone, not invisible. Just present. And in that silence, the kind of silence that holds space for healing, not forgetting something powerful echoed. A city had listened, not just to a veteran. Not just to a dog, but to a truth they tried to bury under concrete and forget. Under paperwork, that people matter, that stories matter, that sometimes sitting down can change more than standing up ever could. Asterisk, they tried to erase him, but the city built a bench instead. Not just for him, but for every soul the world steps around. For the ones who served and the ones still serving, with or without medals. And in that quiet corner of the world, something finally changed. Not loudly, not overnight, but deeply. Thank you for listening. And if this story touched you, don't just scroll past subscribe to the channel. Share it, let it echo. Because someone, somewhere, still needs a bench that doesn't judge.